For those of you who haven't figured it out by now, what with my constant snide comments, I hate this comic arc. Hell, I'd go so far as to say I loathe this godforsaken trash heap of pain and heartache James Robinson chose to call a comic book. This review will not be fair, it will not be balanced, because I honestly hate anything and everything about it! But enough about my nerd rage. Let's quickly sum up some information you'll need to know about the book going in. During this period in Justice League history, most of the League has been replaced by younger counterparts. Dick Grayson stepped up to become Batman, Bruce was supposedly dead at the time, and the rest of the team we'll be following was made up of former Titans and the children of the Justice Society of America. This team was by no means inexperienced, but very few of these heroes had been on the League before, and many were still living in the shadows of their former mentors. As such, pitting this younger incarnation of the Justice League against evil versions of the Big Seven League, minus Martian Manhunter and Aquaman, obviously, has the potential to be a fantastic story, and would make perfect use of the Crime Syndicate as an avatar for being in their mentor's shadows. The problem with this story is not the concept, it is its execution. But that's enough tiptoeing around the actual comic. Let's get this review started already. Issue 50 opens with a scene between Jesse Quick and Supergirl, where they discuss their recent introduction into the Justice League and some recent events in their lives. It's all good character stuff, the artwork is good, and it all serves to catch up readers who aren't familiar with every single character in their recent histories. The two continue talking until... more backstory I need to sum up. This woman, who has conveniently contorted her body so as to show off both her boobs and her ass despite being supposedly exhausted and terrified, is the Green Lantern of Earth 9, the Tangent Comics universe. Now, I'm by no means an expert on it, but supposedly Tangent Comics was an alternate universe created by DC Comics to explore the idea of a world that was altered by the existence of metahumans. Basically, instead of a universe where technology and civilization is the same as the world of the reader, Tangent Comics is about a world that's completely different because of its heroes. It's an interesting concept, one which I kinda wish I knew more about. For the purposes of this story, though, the only reason we see the Tangent Comics world is because it's been destroyed. Yeah, we're off to a great start here, guys. We get this gigantic exposition dump from the Green Lantern about how Alexander Luthor set up a doomsday device in the event of his death that would destroy the Crime Syndicate's entire planet. In order to buy themselves time, the Crime Syndicate dumped as much of the evil energy as they could onto another world, which expanded and soon destroyed it. And this is where we start running into the logic problems of this book. Let me break this down, okay? First, when the hell did Alexander Luthor die? Last we heard of the Morrison anti-Luthor, he'd been freed from Ultraman's prison and was stirring up trouble for the Crime Syndicate again. Both Tangent Green Lantern and the League talk as though his death happened ages ago and is common knowledge, but I have read every Crime Syndicate story involving the Morrison version, and I have no idea what the hell is going on! Second, a doomsday device that'll kill everyone in the event of his death? Seriously? Putting aside the fact that this is supposed to be a heroic Lex Luthor, the only hero in the Earth 3 Crime Syndicate world, whose goal was to save them from the Crime Syndicate, this is the kind of nonsense that even primary Lex Luthor looks at and goes, that's a bit overkill, don't you think? Third, even assuming that Alexander Luthor would, using some twisted fucking logic, decide to make a doomsday device that would blow up the world, he wouldn't do it with something that could be spread to alternate Earths. A superatomic bomb, maybe. Something at the core of the planet to cause instant death. The destruction of the moon? Those I can see. But this destruction seems designed for the Syndicate to spread it to other worlds. Luthor's beef is with the Crime Syndicate, not with whatever world they dumped his radiation on. Speaking of which, why did they drop the energy off on Earth 19? The only universe the Crime Syndicate had any contact with was the Matter universe. This is the Antimato Morrison Crime Syndicate. They aren't a part of the whole 52 universes thing that came out in Infinite Crisis. In order to even get to Earth 19, they'd have to switch from antimatter over to matter anyway, meaning they have to go through the JLA's world to get to Earth 19. Anyway, The crime syndicate's noses must have been twitching because as soon as Green Lantern finishes her exposition dump, we get a splash page featuring the crime syndicate breaking into the Justice League headquarters. It's worth noting that this incarnation of the crime syndicate features counterparts of both Barry Allen and Hal Jordan, despite Barry's counterpart using the Morrison costume rather than the Earth 3 one like Hal's counterpart does. How did the original Johnny Quick and Power Ring come back? Is it an epic tale, creatively mirroring the death and rebirth of the two in our home universe? No. No, it is not. James Robinson just wrote them back in. What follows is some typical back-and-forth fighting between the Justice League and the Crime Syndicate, the Justice League being a bit handicapped because the Tangent Green Lantern's only power is to raise the dead for one final task. Mid-fight, we get a flashback to the hour before in order for even more exposition. So in the past, Owlman and Superwoman debate over whether or not to just give up on their dying world and take over this one. But Owlman is firm. He still has his daddy issues to work out, and his father dying in purple radiation is a bit on the anticlimactic side for old Thomas. He also points out that they're kind of outnumbered here. They've had a bout of good luck because the League isn't aware of them yet, but once they are, they'll have hundreds of heroes trying to take them down. It's at this point that Ultraman shows up and sides with his wife, Superwoman. As an aside, despite myself, I do really enjoy her dialogue here. Even crappy comics can have some good in them. However, Owlman's plan is to somehow resurrect Alexander Luthor and force him to stop his doomsday device. For a dude with an enhanced cerebral cortex, Owlman can be an idiot sometimes. This plan is dumb, and not just because Alexander Luthor's body should be on the antimatter Earth. If this device is tied to the genetic makeup of Lex Luthor, which is what's being implied, there are 52 universes from which you can pick a perfectly living Lex Luthor. I would try that before trying to resurrect the dead. And then there's this panel. This is the point where, as a Crime Syndicate fan, I bury my face in my hands and weep. Let's not mince words here. Busiek's change of Power Ring from being a counterpart to Kyle to a counterpart of John was cheap. But there was a legitimate, story-driven reason behind the change. Furthermore, Busiek did quite a bit to develop his version of Power Ring. I would argue more than Morrison did with his take on the character. Half a dozen panels involving Power Ring have him discussing his past, how he was a Marine, forced to fight in every godforsaken foreign war in the last decade, how the previous Power Ring conned him into taking the cursed ring, etc. Robinson, on the other hand, just says, They're just back because Hal and Barry are back. Their universe just changed for no reason. But let's forgive the laziness of this idea for a minute. Give it a fair shake. Power Ring could have been changed due to John being on the Justice League at the time of the Syndicate rules, but there are some issues with that. First, despite John Stewart being on the Justice League at the time, Kyle was still the primary Green Lantern. He wasn't dead, he wasn't retired, he was off having adventures of his own book outside the Justice League. Therefore, if the Crime Syndicate was tied to the most iconic versions of their counterparts, which is what's implied here, the Syndicate Rules Power Ring would have remained Kyle's counterpart. If it's tied to the League lineup, then we would have a completely different Crime Syndicate than what is shown here. Robinson is implying that when a character dies or comes back on the primary Earth, that change is reflected without context on the antimatter Earth. The panel above is from issue 9 of Trinity, a weekly series that was published through 2008. Green Lantern Rebirth, the story that brought Hal Jordan back, it came out in 2004, 4 years before Trinity was published. Owlman in this story is clearly Thomas Wayne, the counterpart to Bruce Wayne on our Earth. But as I stated above, Bruce Wayne is dead at this point in continuity. Now, some nerds could argue that Bruce was actually traveling through time and wasn't really dead, but my counter-argument is that Superman never really died either, nor did Barry Allen. But Ultraman clearly references the fact that he was dead once, and the Johnny Quick we've seen before now has always been Wally's counterpart. Let's not beat around the bush here. This is a case of blatantly lazy storytelling. Robinson wanted his league to face counterparts of the most iconic version of the Justice League, and he could not be bothered to write a legitimate reason for the return of the original Power Ring and Johnny Quick. He pulled something out of his ass, and it falls apart as soon as you start looking at it sideways. Anyway, the flashback crime syndicate learned that Tangent Green Lantern has gone to warn the Justice League, which brings us back to the present. Batman realizes that Owlman has vanished from the fight and asks Jade, daughter of Alan Scott, the original Green Lantern, to cover him as he leaves to track Owlman down. She does, and gets into a serious firefight with Power Ring. I'm not going to comment on this next bit too much because I honestly don't know enough about this era to know what Jade's deal is here, but she basically eats Power Ring's powers and tortures him until finally gaining control over herself. While all that's going on, Batman's finally caught up with Owlman in the Justice League morgue. See, after all the shenanigans the Justice League has gone through with the resurrected or dissected metahumans, they decided that the best option was to keep the bodies of their friends and enemies alike locked away in their basement. Owlman's found Alexander Luthor's body. Again, how? And Dick Grayson begins his fight with Owlman, standing up to the counterpart of his mentor in an epic fight that's sure to include great dialogue about Dick facing off against Bruce's opposite, right? I mean, Robinson couldn't be bothered to make the story about the crime syndicate, but surely he'd leap at the chance to give legitimate character development to his league. No! Batman gets blasted by some of Owlman's allies before we get a single dialogue balloon or thought caption. Meanwhile, Dr. Impossible has brought Owlman a resurrection machine, supposedly capable of restoring the dead Alexander Luthor to life. The machine requires residents from worlds with 3 different core vibration frequencies, which, again, Owlman has the same vibration frequency as our Earth. He's just normally made of antimatter, but whatever, to work. And so Dr. Impossible starts up the machine, and then suddenly pushes Alexander's body off the machine, replacing it with something, it's seriously not clear, and declaring that he's obviously betrayed them and is going to resurrect Darkseid. Except that when the smoke clears, it's not Darkseid. It's some new ZOMG overpowered villain who destroys Dr. Impossible's minions faster than they were shoehorned into the damn story. And here, finally, we finish issue 50. No, I'm serious. All that was just issue 50. It is a giant-sized issue, but still. Unless you think I've finished ranting, oh, no, there's so much more ranting to be done. Pointless character deaths, character assassinations, stupidly overpowered characters, mindless plot twists. JLA-Omega is like a bite-sized version of an event book. All of the crap, none of the substance.